As a specially appointed interrogation expert known for his brutal methods, this is far from his first time taking part in a black site interrogation. He walks into the interrogation room, completely ignoring the soldiers who are dousing the prisoner with cold water, then turns and picks up a baton from the table. Everyone assumes he's about to beat the prisoner, but instead he suddenly strikes down one of the soldiers. The scene shocks everyone, and they immediately rush in to stop him. But the reason he does this is simple. He believes the soldiers are being far too gentle with the terrorist. A few hours earlier, the military had brought FBI agent Helen and H together after receiving a video sent by a terrorist. He's claiming he's got 3 homemade nukes hidden in 3 US cities, and he set them to go off on Friday, 4 days from now. Even though they're described as small nuclear devices, conservative estimates suggest the explosions would still kill tens of millions of people. According to the intelligence they've gathered, the terrorist's name is Younger, a former US Special Forces operative and an expert in explosives. What's more, the records show that after returning from Iraq 3 years ago, Younger illegally purchased 18 pounds of fissile material. Given the video and Younger's technical background, the Department of Defense believes this is no hoax. What's strange is that after mailing the video, Younger stood in front of a surveillance camera for 20 minutes, deliberately allowing the military to arrest him. Hours later, with not a single word of confession, the military finally brings in H and Helen. But no one expects that before questioning even begins, H suddenly beats up a soldier for no apparent reason. While H is being dragged away, Helen quickly enters the interrogation room, hoping to use the moment to earn Younger's trust. As she wipes the water off Younger's body, she casually brings up his family, speaking to him the way she would to a friend. Helen naively believes these standard FBI tactics will work, but Younger completely ignores her. The first attempt ends in failure, and Helen gets nothing useful out of it. Left with no other choice, Helen changes her approach and splits her team into 2 groups. One group tracks down Younger's family, while the other combs through every record on his communication devices, including his credit card transactions. If they can map out all of his movements, they can narrow down where the bombs are hidden. Just then, a superior suddenly barges in and tells her that H wants to discuss the next round of interrogation. But after what he just did, she sees him as nothing more than a despicable bastard. Plus, when they went to H's place for the routine questioning yesterday, her own team got illegally detained. That made Helen think even less of him. Still, orders are orders, and no matter how unwilling she is, Helen has no choice but to comply. What Helen could never imagine is that what happens next will haunt her for the rest of her life. With authorization from the highest-ranking officials, H immediately clears everyone else out of the room. He asks a soldier for a fire axe and straps Younger into a chair. Finally, he uses a special device to secure Younger's right hand to a wooden board. Watching from outside, Helen can't make sense of what H is doing until suddenly he makes his move.
Mr. Younger, you understand what I'm about to do to you?
For a terrorist like Younger, who is also a professionally trained Special Forces soldier, conventional methods no longer work. So H doesn't bother with talk, he simply takes one of Younger's fingers. At that point, the person in charge makes it clear that as long as the objective is achieved, any cost and any method are acceptable, and this only makes H even more unrestrained. He orders his assistant to place a plastic bag over Younger's head, only slicing it open once Younger's breathing becomes rapid and desperate. Is this not to suffocate Younger to death, but to make him understand that he has endless ways to torture him. At the same time, H knows perfectly well that since Younger turned himself in, he had already prepared himself mentally for torture. That's why H doesn't ask Younger a single question, focusing solely on how to inflict pain on him. Only by doing this can he instill fear in Younger, and force him to open his mouth and give up the information they need. Next, H picks up a small knife and without hesitation reaches toward Younger's groin, permanently stripping him of his ability to reproduce within moments. Such cruelty becomes unbearable for Helen, and she cites every legal argument she can think of, loudly condemning the illegality of vigilante punishment. But Charles, the senior official backing H, remains completely unmoved. She then goes to her superior, Jack, insisting that the torture must stop because it violates the Constitution. Jack almost shouts back that if the bombs go off, 10 million people will die, and at that point the Constitution will mean nothing. As much as Helen hates to admit it, this is an undeniable fact. Jack urges Helen to think about the bigger picture, saying that the most critical thing right now is getting the bomb locations out of Younger. As for H, Jack says he can be dealt with through legal channels after everything is over. Under Jack's persuasion, Helen finally calms down. But when she returns to the interrogation room, she finds that H has already come up with new ways to torture Younger. He suspends Younger in midair, drenches him with water, and repeatedly shocks him with a stun baton. Helen has no idea what to do, and unable to stay any longer, she retreats to the restroom to collect herself. Before long, H walks in, and although Helen doesn't want to deal with him, she also desperately wants to resolve the crisis. So Helen turns around and accuses H of relying solely on torture, without asking Younger a single question. If this continues, Younger will only be forced into false confessions, and they will never get the information they need. After hearing this, H doesn't immediately argue back, because from dealing with countless villains, he knows that normal people have limits and fears, while terrorists do not. They exploit the compassion of the majority in order to commit acts that harm others. From the very beginning, the military has been at a disadvantage in this confrontation, and victory depends on whether they can cross the boundaries of human nature, because only extreme cruelty and endless methods can truly make the enemy feel fear. The two then return to the interrogation room together, and while Younger struggles to catch his breath, Helen resumes her softer approach. She walks in, lowers Younger down, and tells him that H will never stop, and that the only way to avoid further suffering is to reveal the bomb locations. Younger looks completely indifferent, having long prepared himself mentally for torture, with no intention of giving up now. Seeing that Younger remains unmoved, Helen plays another card, telling him that his wife and child were denied boarding before their flight. If the bombs explode, Younger's wife and child will not be spared either. This news causes a slight shift in Younger, but he only brushes it off, saying he will propose his terms tomorrow. Before Helen can press further, H walks back in. He doesn't care about Younger's so-called conditions, and as long as no concrete information is given, he will never stop.
I don't need your help. I can take it. I deserve it.
You can stay if you want.
What happens tomorrow?
Hit him.
Clearly, Helen still doesn't understand that in front of someone like Younger, who manipulates human nature, her idealism is almost laughable. Another day passes, and H increases the voltage as instructed. Yet there is still no progress. Someone then informs Ux that his wife has arrived with food, and only then does he leave the interrogation room. Before leaving, he reminds Helen that if Younger falls asleep, she should press the remote to wake him up. Helen is extremely reluctant, but she doesn't care at all, shoving the remote into her hand before walking out to meet his wife. Once outside the interrogation room, he seems like a completely different person, treating his wife with tenderness. In truth, H is not heartless or cruel by nature. He simply knows who truly deserves protection. Not long after H leaves, Younger drifts into unconsciousness, and before Helen has time to think, she presses the electric remote. But when Younger comes to, the remote won't shut off no matter what, and if this continues, Younger will die. Several people rush into the interrogation room and forcibly shut down the electric device, and only then does Younger narrowly escape death. Seeing Younger tortured beyond recognition in the chair, Helen is overwhelmed with rage and storms out to confront H. A 15-second shock is not life-threatening at all, and it's obvious this was deliberate, because H knew Helen would never stand by and do nothing. Even now, Helen still cannot understand why H would use such brutal methods, nor can she accept anything he has done. So after H leaves, Helen asks his wife whether she even knows what her husband is doing, and bluntly says that H is not a normal person. Having been married to H for so many years, his wife naturally understands the kind of work her husband does. In response to Helen's mockery, H's wife doesn't argue back right away, but instead begins to recount her own tragic experience. She says that in Bosnia, 3 men broke into her home and humiliated her in front of her family. In the end, her family was brutally murdered, and those 3 men were her neighbors, the very people Helen would call normal. These words hit Helen like a sledgehammer, leaving her shaken, and she begins to wonder if she was truly wrong. Before Helen can reach any conclusion, H calls her back to the interrogation room. The moment she opens the door, the overwhelming smell of blood nearly makes her vomit, and she sees that Younger's fingers have all been severed. With only 1 day left before the bombs are set to explode, they have to speed things up. He says Younger's nerves are already numb, so he asks her to massage him, claiming that only after relaxing can they have a normal conversation. He just wants Younger to go through intense confrontation, and then use the opponent's wife and kids as a psychological lever. These seemingly casual words are actually the deadliest gentle blade, because Younger doesn't want his wife and child dragged into this either. Seeing the breakdown on Younger's face, H immediately presses the advantage and drives the knife in again. Younger's piercing screams panic Helen as well, and she desperately pleads with him to say something, anything to make H stop. Unable to endure it any longer, Younger finally gives in, but only on the condition that he be allowed to announce his demands. Younger plans to record a video message to the president, so the soldiers prepare a camera for him. Waiting outside, knows perfectly well that Younger is stalling for time, trying to buy himself a chance to breathe. Soon, Younger begins recording, and he presents only 2 demands to the president. First, the United States must stop providing any economic or military support to Islamic countries. Second, all US troops must immediately withdraw from those countries. Younger promises that if the president publicly announces these 2 points to the world, he will reveal the locations of all 3 bombs. The official in charge refuses to even forward these demands to the president, not to mention whether the president would ever agree. The idea that a terrorist would dare try to change national policy is simply absurd, but Bees believes the demand is perfectly reasonable. If withdrawing troops can save tens of millions of lives, why not do it? Seeing the demand as outrageous, the official rejects it without a second thought and orders H to begin the next round of interrogation. Hearing this, Helen immediately rushes into the interrogation room, knowing that H's methods will only grow more brutal. Helen promises Younger that if he reveals the bomb locations, he will be released immediately. Seeing how naive Helen looks, Younger suddenly feels like laughing. After all, he came here voluntarily. Using freedom as a bargaining chip is utterly foolish. When Helen sees H preparing another round of punishment, she quickly leaves the room, while H increases the severity under orders from above. When Helen returns to the interrogation room again, Younger no longer has the strength to scream. Seeing Younger in such a horrific state, Helen still wants to help free him. She asks Younger if the bombs are fake, and after he denies it, she asks him to name at least one hiding location. Only then can the bombs be proven real. Otherwise, the president will never agree to his demands. Younger seems to have reached his limit, and perhaps for the sake of his wife and child, he breaks down in tears and claims that everything is fake, that there are no bombs at all, and that the devices in the video were just props. This entire bombing plot was a massive gamble, and now it seems he is completely lost. But Helen does not easily believe the words of a terrorist. Instead, she cautiously asks him to name the nearest filming location so she can verify it herself. When the general hears that the bombs are fake, he breathes a sigh of relief, unaware that this is a trap deliberately set by Younger. When Helen leads her team to the location Younger mentioned, they quickly narrow down the filming area. Dozens of people search the entire building and find no bomb at all, making it seem like the whole thing was a farce. However, Helen does not let her guard down and orders another search. When Helen reaches the rooftop to survey the area, they notice a box with Younger's photo taped onto it. Before Helen can stop him, a major rips off the photo, and a C4 charge instantly detonates in the city center. Preliminary reports estimate that the explosion results in 53 deaths. Realizing she has been played, Helen storms back into the interrogation room with tears in her eyes, angrily demanding to know why Younger did this. With a cold, emotionless gaze, Younger casually says that she wanted to verify whether the bombs were real, and he just happened to need time to rest. Seeing the hatred burning in Helen's eyes, Younger decides there's no point in pretending anymore.
I love my country! You people crap on it! I love my religion! And you people spit on it! Just remember something. I'm here because I want to be here. I let myself be caught because I'm not a coward. I chose to meet my oppressors face to face. You call me a barbarian, then what are you? Well, you expect me to weep over 50 civilians? You people kill that number every day!
Younger's roar echoed through the tiny interrogation room, and Helen couldn't argue back. The counterterrorism expert, who always prided herself on staying calm and standing on the moral high ground, lost her principles and faith at this moment. She used to think that as long as she stuck to her principles, she could reach Younger with kindness. It wasn't until now that Helen realized Younger didn't need saving at all. She wanted to save 10 million lives, yet 53 innocent people died because of her naivety. Just as Helen sank into self-doubt, her team brought some good news. They traced Younger through a parking ticket in Dallas and found an abandoned warehouse with a bomb inside. After checking, it contained 4.5 pounds of nuclear material. It was a real bomb, but there were less than 3 hours before it would go off. no time to waste. So Helen had no choice but to pin her hopes on H, the one she had underestimated from the start. Boss seemed off now. He looked pretty down. Maybe he realized Younger was a total lunatic and might never confess. Just when he didn't know what to do next, his team reported they had captured Younger's wife and kids. Since Younger cared so much about his family, his wife and kids were obviously the best leverage. Hayes immediately brought Younger's wife into the interrogation room, and the moment he saw her, Younger felt a flicker of inner struggle. Hai threatened to get him to reveal the bomb's exact location or he'd cut pieces of his wife. His wife kept begging him to talk, but he saw the sacrifice as necessary, and no matter how much he suffered, he still didn't budge. Seeing Younger still refuse, grabbed the knife from the table, ready to act. Everyone else rushed to stop him. After all, Younger's wife was innocent. But he didn't get it. The bomb would explode in 2 hours, and Helen was still sympathizing with these terrorists. When Helen tried to take Younger's wife away, he snapped and slashed her neck. It was undeniably brutal, but as an interrogator, he saw it as his duty. I felt guilty about killing an innocent person, but for the lives of tens of millions, he had no choice. This wasn't just a bomb incident, it was a war, and in war, there are always sacrifices. So Aya had to make Younger believe he would stop at nothing to achieve his goal. As the countdown to the bomb ticked closer, Helen urged Hart to keep interrogating. What she didn't know was that what happened next would be a nightmare beyond imagination. He demanded the military bring Younger's 2 kids in, and everyone immediately opposed it. But Aldom assured them he was just scaring Younger and would never actually hurt the kids. Seeing no agreement, H issued an ultimatum. This was the last chance. Bring the kids or die together. In the end, the military gave in, and Younger's 2 kids were quickly brought in. Hayo put a black hood on Younger and pushed him outside the interrogation room. The moment the hood came off, he saw his children waiting inside the room. Seeing Eogjes go in, Younger completely lost it emotionally. Seeing actually about to harm the kids, a mix of rage and helplessness made Younger curse non-stop. He was finally scared. Helen immediately started questioning him, and Younger honestly revealed the exact locations of the 3 bombs. After getting the info, Helen told H to stop, but he ignored her. Har said Younger was lying and that he had to verify the truth before stopping. Everyone suddenly realized Etch was serious. He really would go after the kids. Helen kept insisting the kids were innocent, trying one last time to stop Acha. But Waif seemed possessed. Thinking the terrorist kids weren't innocent, they wouldn't stop the plan for this. Seeing move to the next step, soldiers forcefully broke down the interrogation room door. They swarmed in, knocked Taps to the ground, beat him up, and immediately carried the kids out. When all walked out, everyone looked at him with anger, but he just looked disdainful. Younger was about to kill tens of millions, and yet these people saved his kids? These fools couldn't tell right from wrong, and they couldn't even do the math.
You win. You're in the clear. You don't even have to tell them about the 4th bomb. What do you mean? Don't you know him by now? He's planned this every step of the way. I mean, what if he couldn't hold out? All he's got to do is give us the 3 bombs, right? Now, I remember 15 to 18 pounds of nuclear material missing. 4.5 times 3 is 13.5. Times 4 is 18.
Everyone froze. The commander quickly ordered the kids brought over, saying anyone who stopped it would be shot. Helen firmly disagreed with this bottomless behavior. He thought everyone there had lost their mind. Hay calmly watched the ridiculous scene. Just moments ago, they were stopping him. Now they wanted him to continue interrogating.
Taz said he could continue.
But Helen had to personally bring the kids back.
If you think you're righteous, then you decide the lives of tens of millions.
Justify me. Tell me it's okay.
You know if there's another bomb
You can't do this! We're fucking human beings! Let the bomb go off! We cannot do this!
Hai turned away in disappointment and untied Younger from the chair. In this human war, H was neither understood nor respected, so he saw no need to continue. But the commander suddenly pulled a gun, threatening H to continue, or his own kids would die. As was struggling with this, Younger suddenly appeared from behind and grabbed the commander's gun. Everyone tensed up, drawing their guns in response. At this point, Younger had technically won this human war, but he knew his sins were unforgivable. So to atone and protect his kids, Younger entrusted them to Helen and then took his own life. Meanwhile, the military found 3 bombs at the locations Younger gave and successfully defused them before they went off. Just when everyone thought it was over, a 4th bomb was still hidden in a nearby corner. And that's where the movie ends. The existence of the fourth bomb made all the previous ends justify the means. Actions seem pointless. Maybe the truly terrifying thing isn't the terrorists themselves. It's when we start believing it's all necessary that we've already crossed the line of conscience. That's it for today's breakdown. If you liked it, please like and follow, and we'll see you next time.